Roger Penrose, so he did a remarkable job in developing the Twistor idea, and there's beautiful mathematics within Twistor theory.
Now in Twistor theory, you take a different point of view. The basic element is not so much a point, but as a light ray.
String theory does have the capacity to describe the world as we know it. So I'm not sitting here dogmatically saying string theory. No, not at all. I'm saying truth.
Well, Twistor theory describes the structure of space-time in an unusual way.
Is it possible that there's some deep truth in the string theoretic approach? Yes. Is it possible that there's some deep truth in Roger's approach?
This presentation is not a live debate between Roger Penrose and Brian Greene. Instead, it brings together their individual insights on two groundbreaking theories.
I agree that string theory is a beautiful mathematical structure. I agree that there is zero experimental or observational data establishing that string theory is the correct theory of the universe. And the theory absolutely requires that the fabric of space be far more subtle and rich than Einstein himself or Newton would have thought. The possibility of extra dimensions is a natural consequence of string theory. All of this is true. Nevertheless, string theory does have the capacity to describe the world as we know it. Is it the right theory? We don't know. And so as the most promising approach that we have yet found for putting Einstein's ideas of gravity together with the laws of quantum physics, a union that has to happen. You can't have physics without general relativity and quantum mechanics playing well together. As string theory is still the most promising approach, of course we should pursue it mathematically, vigorously, seeking to extract some observation or experiment that maybe one day we can carry out. But as I said in the Washington Post article, if somebody comes along tomorrow and shows that there's a mathematical flaw in string theory, we should abandon it. This has never happened. If tomorrow somebody should come along and say, look at this new idea that we can put general relativity and quantum mechanics together and it's immediately close to the world and we can test it, and let's go, of course I'd be excited and I would jump at that possibility as a new direction to pursue. So I'm not sitting here dogmatically saying string theory. No, not at all. I'm saying truth. Let's try to find things that take us closer to truth. At the moment, that is string theory in terms of putting the laws of physics into a unified framework. But is it possible that we'll have something else? 3 years, 5 years, 100 years? That string theory will be relegated to the dustbin of science? Is that possible? Of course it's possible.
Well, Twistor theory is a little bit hard to describe because it's a mathematical theory which describes the structure of space-time in an unusual way. So rather than thinking of space-time, which is a four-dimensional space, three of space and one of time, and a point represents a moment which has a momentary existence. So it's the basic element of space-time is a point, and then you built it out of the points. Now in Twistor theory, you take a different point of view. The basic element is not so much a point, but as a light ray. So you think of the history of a photon, if you like, which is a line in space-time. It's what's called a null line. It travels at the speed of light, well, light ray would. And if you like, your analog of a point is a light ray. It's actually not quite that, it's more than that, because the light ray is only the trajectory of a photon. The Twistor idea incorporates other things like the momentum and the angular momentum of the photon. However, and the spin of the photon. You see, photons have a helicity and a spin. The helicity depends on which way it's spinning, right-handed or left-handed. And when you incorporate the handedness of the photon, you find it's not completely localized. And there is a structure which is not localized along a light ray, but spread out in a certain way. And it twists around itself. And this twisting configuration is the origin of the name Twistor. So that the element has this twisting characteristic. You see, string theory, the main trouble with string theory, in my view, is that it's not very carefully focused on the dimensionality of space-time. Originally, the idea of strings quite appealed to me when I heard about it. But then when they said, oh, it only works in 26 dimensions. So, okay, well, that's the end as far as I'm concerned. That's the wrong number of dimensions. Then they got it down to 10 dimensions, which seemed to be an improvement, but it's a long way along from the 4 dimensions we need for space-time. So I didn't get very excited about twistor theory. When I learned it, only you had to do it in 10 dimensions or 26 dimensions, or 10 and 26 at the same time, which was even more confusing to me. It didn't really make geometrical sense. Now, there have ways of dealing with this in string theory, but it's not very natural. And it doesn't really fit in with the geometry of space-time in a nice way. So I never, after the dimensionality became too big, I gave up on the subject, although I was quite attractive to the original ideas of it, but not after it became 10 and 26 dimensions at the same time, and now 11. It all seems to me not focused directly on the space we live in. The space we live in has 4 space and 1 time, 3 space and 1 time dimension. And it's 4-dimensional with that particular signature. See, 1 and 3, that's important too, because the twistor theory relates very specifically to space-time with 1 time and 3 space. And the way it works, I should say there are variants of twistor theory, because after developing some of these ideas, the mathematicians picked up, actually interestingly, because they supplied some useful ideas in the twistor, particularly Michael Atiyah, who was a friend of mine, and we were in the same institute in Oxford for a while, and I learned a lot of the mathematics that is needed for twistor theory. Some of these ideas which involve a quality known as cohomology. And cohomology is very necessary as part of twistor theory if you want to describe fields like electromagnetism. If you want to describe the Maxwell field in twistor theory, you have to bring in this mathematical notion of cohomology, which fits in very beautifully with twistor theory. And so I needed this input from the mathematicians, particularly Michael Atiyah. And then the mathematicians picked up on some of these ideas in twistor theory, how you describe nonlinear fields and things like this. And this became a sizable subject within mathematics. And so it's developed in certain directions, which are not exactly the same. I should say there are certain differences. I'm not quite sure how to say this. You see, it depends on the geometry of space-time. It has what's called a Minkowskian signature. So you have 1 time and 3 space. So it's not just like a 4-dimensional space-time. It's very specific to 1 time and 3 space. And the twistors work very naturally in that framework. Now, if you're just doing pure mathematics, as the mathematicians are, then they like to have it 4 space dimensions, all 4, you see. They don't like 1 and 3. They like them to be...
Look, Roger Penrose, so he did a remarkable job in developing the twistor idea. And there's beautiful mathematics within twistor theory. And in fact, there are subtle ways that the twistor idea has been in dialogue with string theory. It's not as though these ideas are at opposite ends of some kind of theory spectrum. And so, yes, is it possible that there's some deep truth in Roger's approach? Yes. Is it possible that there's some deep truth in the string theoretic approach? Yes. How will we figure it out? Continue to work, to develop the equations, develop the mathematics, extract whatever insight we can into the theories. That's the only way to answer those deep questions. An important lesson, we're still now struggling 100 years after quantum mechanics was written down by Heisenberg and Schrödinger. This is 1925 and 1926. 100 years later, we can use the equations to make predictions that are borne out by experiment. We can use the equations to engineer things like integrated circuits, making everything from, cell phones to laptop computers that have revolutionized life on this planet. And yet, even with those successes, there are deep questions within quantum mechanics that we've yet to resolve. And the biggest one is, how do you go from the quantum description of a reality that is described as a fuzzy haze of probabilities, which is the language of quantum physics, how do you go from that to the definite reality that we all experience every moment of our lives? What's the transition from the quantum to the
How
classical?
matter is transformed from the quantum world to classical reality.
Yes, that's the deep question. Now, there are many physicists who think that's a non-question. Niels Bohr, founder of quantum mechanics, thought that was a non-question. He said, you're thinking about things wrong. You're stuck in an old mindset. The new mindset, Bohr said, is you have a realm of classical equipment, and that's the stuff that we see in laboratories, and you always use the classical language to describe those things. And then when you're talking about the molecules and the atoms and particles, you use the quantum language only down there. The problem with that perspective is that the equipment is made of the very same ingredients that you use quantum mechanics to describe. It's made of the electrons and the protons and the neutrons. And so if quantum mechanics describes the ingredients in the equipment, then it must describe the equipment, which is nothing but a conglomeration of the ingredients. And it's that step that Bohr would somehow resist, and it's that step that we are still struggling to understand.
Quantum mechanics is for you local or non-local?
Quantum mechanics, as far as we can tell, is non-local, and this is one of the deep insights that came from the work of John Bell, working in the 1960s, a name that most people have never heard of. Everybody knows
But
Einstein.
should.
They should, because it was John Bell, almost as a hobby. He was working at CERN, particle accelerator, was working on other things, but in his spare time liked to think about the foundations of quantum mechanics. And in his work, he was able to reveal a test to determine whether or not certain ideas that Einstein had, that the universe was local, what you do here only affects things here, and that it was real, that particles always have definite features. He came up with a test of Einstein's view. Nobody thought you could test Einstein's view. It was just metaphysics, ideas. Go away, Einstein, you're just thinking philosophy. We're physicists, which is basically what people said toward the latter decades of Einstein's life. But John Bell said, no, this is not just philosophy, this is physics. We can actually test whether these things Einstein was saying are true. And when the tests were done, they, to most people's satisfaction, revealed that Einstein's view that the universe was local, that was not true, that the universe is non-local. In a sense, what you do here can, in a very specific quantum way, be connected to something that happens over there.